We've all seen it in the movies. The hero, struck down in glorious battle, whispers his last defiant words and dies with honor. You need to forget all of it. This is what it was really like to die in a medieval battle. It wasn't glorious or heroic. It was brutal, filthy, and terrifying. And it probably wouldn't be an enemy's sword that killed you. Forget everything Hollywood taught you about medieval combat. The reality of a soldier's final moments had nothing to do with heroic last stands and everything to do with chaos, agony, and just disappearing. The truth, buried in mass graves and written in the bones of the dead, is far more brutal than any film dares to show. Using historical records and modern archaeology, we're going to uncover what death on a medieval battlefield was actually like. And it was a process that started long before the fatal blow ever landed. Before you even saw the enemy, the battle was already trying to kill you. The first assault wasn't on your body, but on your mind. Just imagine the noise, a deafening, constant roar of thousands of men screaming, the shriek of metal on metal, the terrified sounds of wounded horses. It was pure sensory overload, a wall of sound designed to break your nerve before you ever swung a weapon. The ground beneath you, churned into a slick mud of dirt and blood, made every single step a struggle. In this chaos, your biggest enemy might not even be the other army. It could be your own side. In the crushing confusion of a melee, panic could shatter formation in seconds. An orderly advance could turn into a stampede, where men were trampled to death by their own comrades trying to get away. If you're watching this far, hit like. It helps bring more forgotten truths to life. And then there was a smell, an overpowering stench of sweat, mud, fear, and blood. Medieval accounts describe warriors experiencing symptoms we would now recognize as combat stress or PTSD, plagued by terror long after the fighting was over. For many, the psychological battle was lost before the first physical blow was even struck. If you managed to keep your nerve through the initial chaos, you'd then face the violence itself. But it wouldn't be the clean, elegant sword duel you see on screen. The goal wasn't to disarm your opponent. It was to bypass their armor or, failing that, simply crush the person inside it. Archaeological evidence is brutally clear on this. Mass graves from battles like Toten and Visby revealed men who suffered extensive, horrific trauma. Skeletons show skulls smashed by warhammers and limbs mangled by heavy poleaxes. These weapons didn't just cut, they tore, shattered, and butchered. Forensic analysis shows that a key cause of death for armored fighters was blunt force trauma. The sheer concussive force of a blow could break bones right underneath the steel plate. The skeletons tell the story. Skulls from sites like Toten don't show one clean injury. They show multiple catastrophic wounds. This is evidence of a frenzy of violence where a downed enemy would be struck again and again and again just to make sure they were dead. In some cases, wounds on the back and legs suggest men were cut down while trying to flee or were executed after being captured. Death wasn't a single precise event. It was a savage hacking process. For a medieval soldier, a direct, instantly fatal blow was almost a mercy. A far more common fate was to survive the initial wound only to face a much slower, more agonizing death in the hours and days that followed. Still here? Drop and oh glory. In the comments if you're following this far. A simple puncture from an arrow or a deep cut from a blade was often a death sentence, not because of the wound itself, but because of what came next. Infection. In a world without antibiotics, any wound contaminated by dirt, rust, or bacteria from the weapon could lead to gangrene, tetanus, and sepsis. A stab to the gut was one of the most feared injuries, guaranteeing a slow and excruciating death from internal bleeding and peritonitis over several days. Even if you avoided infection, simple blood loss could be just as deadly. Battlefield medicine was rudimentary at best. While some surgeons had surprising skill, this was mostly for the wealthy. For the common soldier, effective care was almost non-existent. Many who were celebrated as survivors on the day of the battle would be dead within a week, succumbing to fever and infection in a squalid camp, a long way from any imagined glory. And what if you were wounded, but on the losing side? Don't expect a helping hand. No one was coming to save you. As your army broke and ran, the real slaughter would begin. Most casualties in a medieval battle happened during the retreat, when fleeing soldiers were helpless against pursuing cavalry. If you were a common soldier, unlucky enough to be left wounded on the field, your fate was grim. You'd be stripped of your armor, weapons, and even your clothes by the victors or by opportunistic scavengers who descended on the field. Left naked and bleeding in the mud, you'd likely die from your wounds, from exposure, or be mercifully killed by those picking the field clean. For nobles, there was a chance of being captured and held for ransom. But an average foot soldier had no such value. They were simply an obstacle to be cleared. The mass graves tell this story plainly. Bodies piled on top of each other without ceremony, a testament to the anonymous and brutal end that awaited the vast majority of fighters. The romantic vision of a glorious death in battle is a complete myth. The reality for the average medieval soldier was a death defined by terror, filth, and unimaginable pain. You were more likely to be trampled to death by your own friends than to die in a noble duel. You were more likely to have your skull shattered by a hammer than to be cleanly struck by a sword. And if you survived the fight, you were more likely to die of a festering wound days later than to be carried from the field a hero. The archaeological record doesn't lie. It shows us that dying in a medieval battle wasn't an honorable end, but a cold, anonymous, and horrifying one. If you value real history without the Hollywood gloss, subscribe to Mythic Tales and join us as we uncover the myths and dark truths of the past.